I watched from my bedroom window as my nephew's truck pulled away into the darkness, its tail lights disappearing down the long driveway. It was 3 in the morning. In the truck bed, covered hastily with a tarp, I'd seen the unmistakable shape of my father's old table saw. The same saw I'd used to build this house 40 years ago. The same saw I'd promised my brother Kevin's father that I'd pass down to Kevin when he was ready to take over the family carpentry business. But Kevin wasn't taking over anything. He was stealing from me. And this wasn't the first time. I suppose I should start at the beginning, though it's hard to pinpoint exactly when things went wrong. Maybe it was the moment I said yes when Kevin asked if he could stay in the guest cottage. Maybe it was earlier, when I didn't set clearer boundaries after my brother passed. Or maybe it started long before that, in ways I'm only beginning to understand now. My name is David Richardson. I'm 65 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I'd spent 35 years building custom homes across southern Ontario, earned a decent reputation, saved enough to retire comfortably. After my divorce, 15 years back, I'd bought this property outside Orangeville, 20 acres of mixed forest and meadow, with the house I'd built myself sitting at the center. My workshop, a timber frame building that I'd constructed with my brother before he got sick, stood about 50 meters from the main house. That workshop was my pride and joy. Every tool in it had a story. Every piece of equipment had been chosen carefully, maintained obsessively. When my brother Tom died 3 years ago, his son Kevin took it hard. Kevin was 32, had been drifting between jobs, never quite finding his footing. Tom had always worried about him. At the funeral, Kevin pulled me aside, tears in his eyes, and told me he wanted to learn the trade properly, honor his dad's memory, maybe take over the business I'd been slowly winding down. I was touched. Honestly, I was. Tom and I had been close, and the idea of keeping the family craft alive through his son felt right. So when Kevin asked if he could stay in the cottage just temporarily, he said, while he got back on his feet and learned from me, I agreed without hesitation. That was 8 months ago. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. Kevin would show up at the workshop each morning, eager to learn. I taught him how to read blueprints properly, how to choose wood, how to measure twice and cut once. He seemed genuinely interested. We'd break for lunch, and he'd ask questions about his father, about the projects we'd done together. Those conversations meant something to me. I'd lost my brother, but here was a chance to know him again through his son. But gradually, things changed. Kevin started sleeping in later, showing up to the workshop around noon instead of 8. He'd have excuses, wasn't feeling well, had to run errands, had a headache from the night before. When he did show up, he'd spend half the time on his phone. The questions about carpentry dried up. The enthusiasm faded. I tried to be understanding. Grief doesn't follow a schedule, I told myself. The kid was processing his father's death, trying to find himself. I remembered my own aimless years after my father passed, so I gave him space. I didn't push. Looking back now, I can see that was my first mistake. The second mistake was not asking more questions about his finances. Kevin had mentioned he was between jobs when he moved in, but I'd assumed he had some savings, some income source. I didn't ask him to pay rent for the cottage. It would have felt wrong, charging my nephew, but I'd expected he'd contribute something. Buy groceries occasionally, help with property maintenance. Something that never happened. Instead, I found myself covering everything. His food, his utilities, his gas when his truck was empty. It started small. $20 here, $50 there, but it added up. After a few months, I'd probably spent $3,000 or $4,000 on him. But he was family, Tom's son. And I kept thinking, any day now, he'll turn things around. The suspicious behavior started about 6 weeks ago. I first noticed it one Tuesday evening. I'd gone into town for groceries, and when I came back, I saw Kevin walking out of my workshop. That wasn't unusual by itself. He had a key, and he was supposed to be learning to use the equipment. But something about his body language caught my attention. He was looking around quickly, nervously, before closing the door. When he saw my truck coming up the drive, he jumped slightly, then waved and headed back to the cottage with his hands in his pockets. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe I'd startled him. That was all. But 2 days later, I went into the workshop to work on a small project, a bookshelf for the local library, and I couldn't find my cordless drill. It was a good one. Milwaukee M18, probably worth $300. I'd used it just the previous week, and I always kept it in the same spot on my tool bench. Now it was gone. I searched for an hour, checked every shelf, every drawer, every corner. Nothing. Finally, I walked over to the cottage and knocked on Kevin's door. He answered in sweatpants and a t-shirt, even though it was 2 in the afternoon. "Hey, Kevin, you seen my cordless drill? The red Milwaukee?" He shook his head without hesitation. "Nope, haven't touched it." "Maybe you left it at a job site?" "I haven't been to a job site in 3 months. He shrugged. "Don't know what to tell you, Uncle Dave. Want me to help you look?" "No, it's fine. Probably just misplaced it." But I hadn't misplaced it. I knew my workshop better than I knew my own kitchen. Everything had its place, and that drill had been there. Over the next few weeks, other things went missing. Small items at first. A box of premium drill bits, my pneumatic nail gun, a laser level. Each time, I'd search, find nothing, and feel this growing unease in my gut. Each time, I'd consider asking Kevin again, but something held me back. I didn't want to accuse him without proof. He was grieving. He was family. Surely there was another explanation. Then the bigger items started disappearing. My compound miter saw vanished overnight. That was $1,000 piece of equipment. Then my planer. Then my router table. I cataloged everything that was gone, and the list made my stomach turn. Easily $6,000 or $7,000 worth of tools, probably more. Some of them had belonged to my father. Some I'd bought with Tom back when we first started the business together. I confronted Kevin again, this time more directly. "Someone's been taking tools from the workshop." He looked genuinely concerned. "Seriously? Like someone broke in? The door's always locked, no signs of forced entry. That's weird. Did you call the police?" I studied his face, looking for any tell, any hint of guilt. He met my eyes without flinching. "Not yet. But I'm considering it." "Yeah, you should. That's messed up. I'll keep an eye out, okay? Let you know if I see anything suspicious." That night, I lay awake trying to make sense of it. Could it really be Kevin? My own nephew? Tom's boy? The alternative was that I was losing my mind, forgetting where I put things, imagining thefts that weren't happening. But I wasn't senile. I was 65, not 90. My memory was fine. The next morning, I made a decision. I drove into Orangeville and bought a wireless security camera system. Nothing fancy, just 2 cameras with motion detection that would send alerts to my phone. I installed one covering the workshop's main door and another inside, positioned to catch most of the interior space. I didn't tell Kevin. For 3 days, nothing happened. The cameras recorded me going in and out to work on the library bookshelf. They recorded a raccoon nosing around the door one evening. They recorded absolutely nothing suspicious. Then, on the 4th night, my phone buzzed at 2:30 in the morning. Motion detected at the workshop. I grabbed my phone and opened the app. The interior camera showed Kevin inside my workshop, moving quickly between the tool benches and the door. He had his phone out, using its flashlight to illuminate the space. I watched him pick up my father's hand plane, set beautiful old Stanley planes that had to be worth $1,500, and examined them carefully. Then he took photos, multiple photos, from different angles. I felt something cold settle into my chest. Not anger yet, but something worse. Betrayal has a particular feeling. It's not hot like rage. It's cold, heavy, like swallowing stones. Kevin put the planes back and moved to the bandsaw. More photos. Then to my table, saw the one I'd seen in his truck that first night I was watching. He measured it with a tape measure, took notes on his phone. This wasn't impulsive theft. This was calculated. He was cataloging my equipment, documenting it for something. Sales listings, probably. I didn't confront him that night. I saved the footage and forced myself to go back to bed, though I didn't sleep. My mind was racing, trying to understand. Why would he do this? What had I done to deserve it? I'd opened my home to him, tried to teach him, supported him financially, and this was the thanks I got? But even then, some part of me wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe he was just taking photos to show someone. Maybe he was planning to buy his own tools and wanted to know what brands I recommended. Maybe. I spent the next day watching him, really watching him for the first time in months. The way he avoided eye contact when I asked about his job search. The way he changed the subject when I mentioned the missing tools. The way he kept checking his phone, hiding the screen whenever I walked near. That evening, after Kevin had gone back to the cottage, I sat in my workshop, surrounded by decades of accumulated tools and equipment, and I let myself admit the truth. My nephew was robbing me blind. Had been for weeks, maybe months, and I'd been too trusting, too willing to see the best in him, to realize it. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? I could confront him directly, but he'd already lied to my face multiple times. He'd just deny it again. I could call the police, but what did I actually have? Security footage of him taking photos? That wasn't proof of theft. The missing tools could be anywhere. He was smart enough not to keep them in the cottage where I might find them. No, I needed more evidence. I needed to know the full extent of what he'd done. I needed to understand how he was getting rid of the items, where they were going, how long this had been happening. Only then could I decide how to proceed. So I watched, and I waited. The cameras captured him, returning to the workshop 3 more times over the next week, always in the middle of the night. Each time, he'd photograph equipment, take measurements, sometimes move smaller items toward the door, but he never actually removed anything while I was watching. He must have been taking things during the day when I was out, or maybe when I was in the house and wouldn't notice. Then I got lucky, if you can call it that. I'd gone into town for a meeting with an old client. He wanted me to look at a renovation project, see if I might be interested in consulting. On my way back, I decided to stop at the Tim Hortons on Highway 10 for a coffee. And there, in the parking lot, I saw Kevin's truck. I almost drove past, but something made me pull in, park a few spots away. Kevin was in the cab, talking on his phone. His body language was animated, gesturing with his free hand. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could read his expression through the windshield. Excited, maybe nervous. After a few minutes, a white panel van pulled up next to him. A man in his 40s got out, heavy build, beard, wearing work clothes. He and Kevin shook hands, then walked around to Kevin's truck bed. Kevin pulled back a tarp, revealing my contractor-grade table saw. The same one from my workshop, the same one I'd watched him photograph. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The man examined the saw, running his hands over it, checking the blade, the fence, the motor. They talked for a few minutes. Then the man pulled out his wallet and handed Kevin cash. A thick stack of bills. Together, they lifted the saw into the van. The whole transaction took maybe 10 minutes. Then they shook hands again, the man drove off, and Kevin stood there counting the money with a smile on his face. I sat in my truck feeling numb. There it was. Proof. He wasn't just taking photos. He wasn't planning to buy his own tools. He was selling mine. Meeting buyers in parking lots, probably finding them on Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace, pocketing the cash. I waited until Kevin drove away. Then I followed him. Not back to my property, but north, toward Shelburne. He stopped at a self-storage facility on the edge of town. I parked across the street and watched as he unlocked a unit number 47 and went inside. He emerged 10 minutes later empty-handed and drove off. A storage unit. That's where he was keeping everything. I sat there for a long time after he left, staring at that orange door marked 47. Inside that unit was probably every tool he'd stolen from me. All the equipment I thought was gone forever. My father's tools, Tom's tools. My life's work, reduced to merchandise. I drove home in a daze, went straight to my workshop and just stood there, looking at the half-empty shelves, the gaps where equipment used to sit. I thought about my brother, about how proud he'd been of his son despite Kevin's struggles, about how Tom had made me promise in those final weeks to look after Kevin if anything happened. He's a good kid, Dave. Just needs direction. Will you keep an eye on him for me? I'd promised, and I'd meant it, but this wasn't what Tom would have wanted. This wasn't looking after Kevin. This was enabling him to rob me, to take advantage of my grief and guilt. That night, I made my decision. I spent the next 3 days gathering evidence. I downloaded all the security footage and saved it to multiple drives. I went through my tools inventory. I'd kept meticulous records over the years and created a detailed list of everything that was missing. Serial numbers, where I had them, purchase receipts, photos from before items disappeared. I documented the transaction I'd witnessed at Tim Hortons. I even drove back to the storage facility and took photos of Kevin entering the unit. Then I called Detective Sarah Morrison at the Orangeville Police Service. I'd met her a few years back when there'd been a series of break-ins in the area, and she'd interviewed me as part of the investigation. She remembered me. "David, what can I do for you?" I explained the situation calmly, methodically. The missing tools, the security footage, the storage unit, the sale I'd witnessed. I sent her all the documentation. She was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then, "I'm sorry this happened to you. Family situations like this are always difficult, but you've done good work documenting everything. That'll help. Let me talk to my sergeant and see what we can do." 3 days later, Detective Morrison called me back. "We got a warrant for the storage unit. You were right, it's full of your equipment. We've also been monitoring his online activity. He's got active listings on Kijiji and Facebook for several items that match your descriptions. We have enough to bring him in." "What happens now?" "We'll arrest him, probably tomorrow. Given the value of the stolen property and the duration of the theft, we're looking at serious charges. Break and enter. Theft over $5,000. If convicted, he could be looking at jail time." I felt sick. "He's my nephew." "I know." Her voice was kind. "But he's also a thief, and he targeted you specifically because you're family. That makes it worse, not better." That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about Kevin as a boy, running around Tom's workshop while we worked, about Tom's funeral, about Kevin crying on my shoulder, about the promise I'd made. But I also thought about the lies, the manipulation, the way he'd looked me in the eye and denied everything, even as he was actively stealing from me. The way he'd traded on his father's memory and my guilt to gain access to my home and my trust. No, I'd done the right thing. They arrested Kevin the next morning. I wasn't there, but Detective Morrison called to let me know. They'd executed the warrant at the storage unit first, documented everything inside, then picked him up at the cottage. She said he'd been shocked, tried to claim the tools were his, then said I'd given them to him. But the security footage and the online sales listings told a different story. After they took him away, I walked over to the cottage. The door was unlocked. Inside, I found his laptop still open on the kitchen table. The screen showed his Kijiji account. Dozens of listings, all for my tools. Some items had already sold. He'd made thousands of dollars off my equipment. I scrolled through his messages with buyers, reading his friendly, casual tone. "Yeah, these are great tools. Just don't need them anymore. Moving away from carpentry. He'd never been moving toward it in the first place." I found a notebook, too, tucked under the sofa cushions. Inside, he'd been keeping records, a ledger of sorts, listing every item he'd taken, the date he took it, and how much he'd sold it for. The total came to just over $18,000. $18,000 of my property, sold over 6 months. The notebook also contained notes about other items in my workshop. A wish list, essentially, of what to take next. My father's antique woodworking bench was at the top. "Prob worth $2K plus," he'd written. "Take after Uncle D goes to Cottage for a week." I'd mentioned to Kevin a few weeks back that I was thinking of spending a week at my friend's cottage up near Huntsville. He'd immediately encouraged me to go. "You should take a break, Uncle Dave. You've been working too hard." Now I understood why. I sat in his cottage, surrounded by his things, and felt something break open inside me. Not anger anymore, just sadness. Such profound sadness for what could have been, for the relationship we should have had, for the nephew I thought I knew. But that nephew had never really existed, or maybe he had, once, and grief and desperation had twisted him into something else. Either way, the Kevin I'd welcomed into my home wasn't the Kevin who'd been stealing from me for 6 months. The legal process moved slowly. Kevin was released on bail. His mother, Tom's ex-wife, put up her house as collateral. She called me, crying, begging me to drop the charges. He's your nephew, David, your brother's son. How can you do this to family? I kept my voice steady. Ask your son how he could steal from family. Ask him how he could look me in the eye every day while robbing me blind. I'm not doing this to him, Helen. He did this to himself. She hung up on me. Over the next few weeks, the story spread through our small community. I'd lived here for 15 years, built half the houses in the area. People knew me. They knew Kevin too, knew he was Tom's boy. Opinions were divided. Some people supported me, understood why I'd pressed charges. Others thought I should have handled it privately, that airing family business in court was shameful. I didn't care anymore. I'd spent too much of my life worrying about what people thought, trying to be the good guy, the understanding one, the one who gave people chances. And where had it gotten me? $18,000 poorer, with a workshop full of gaps where my father's tools used to sit. The preliminary hearing was set for August. Kevin's lawyer, paid for by Helen, tried to negotiate a plea deal. If Kevin pled guilty to theft under $5,000, returned the remaining tools, and paid restitution, they'd recommend probation instead of jail time. Detective Morrison called to discuss it. It's your call, David. The Crown will follow your lead on this. I thought about it for a long time. Jail time felt harsh. He was young, stupid, driven by desperation and possibly addiction. I'd started to suspect drug use explained some of his behavior, though I had no proof. Prison might just make things worse, but probation felt too lenient. He'd stolen from me for 6 months, lied systematically, planned to steal more, and even now, he hadn't apologized, hadn't shown any remorse. According to Detective Morrison, he was still claiming he had permission to sell the tools, that I'd verbally agreed to let him. No plea deal, I told her. If he wants to claim I gave him permission, let him try to prove it in court. The trial date was set for October. But 2 weeks before trial, something changed. Kevin's lawyer called and asked if we could meet. Just the two of us, off the record. We met at a coffee shop in Creemore, neutral ground. He was a young guy, maybe 40, tired-looking. My client wants to plead guilty, he said. Full restitution, formal apology, whatever you want. He just wants this to end. What changed? The lawyer sighed. Between you and me? He's broke. His mother can't afford to keep paying my fees, and legal aid won't cover a trial if there's a reasonable plea offer on the table. He's looking at court-appointed counsel if this goes to trial, and frankly, the evidence against him is overwhelming. He's going to lose, probably badly. At least with a guilty plea, we can negotiate sentencing. So he's not actually sorry. He's just out of options. The lawyer didn't deny it. Look, Mr. Richardson, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But ask yourself what you really want here. Revenge or resolution? Because dragging this through trial won't give you back what you lost. It'll just cost everyone more time and money. I went home and sat in my workshop for a long time. The police had returned most of the stolen tools they'd been held as evidence, but were finally released. I'd spent the last week organizing them, putting everything back in its proper place, but it didn't feel the same. The space had been violated. Every time I picked up a tool now, I wondered if Kevin had handled it, photographed it, planned to sell it. The lawyer was right about one thing. A trial wouldn't fix that. Nothing would. In the end, we accepted a revised plea deal. Kevin pled guilty to theft over $5,000, paid back $8,000 in restitution, all he had left from the sales, and received 2 years probation plus 200 hours community service. He was also required to attend counseling and stay away from my property. The judge made it clear, any violation of probation would mean jail time. I attended the sentencing hearing. Kevin stood in the prisoner's box, looking small and defeated. The judge asked if he had anything to say. He turned toward me, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to follow his father around the workshop. I'm sorry, Uncle Dave. I know that doesn't mean much now, but I am. I didn't respond. I just looked at him until he turned away. Outside the courthouse afterward, Helen approached me one last time. Are you happy now? Her voice was bitter. You've destroyed his life. His record will follow him forever. I didn't destroy his life, Helen. He made his choices. I just made sure he faced the consequences. Tom would be ashamed of you. That hit hard. Harder than I wanted to admit. But I held my ground. Tom would be ashamed of what his son became. I kept my promise to look after Kevin. But looking after someone doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. Tom would have understood that. She walked away without another word. I haven't heard from her since. That was 3 months ago. Life has slowly returned to normal, or a new version of normal. I've been taking on more consulting projects, staying busy. The workshop feels like mine again, though I've added more security cameras and better locks. Trust, once broken, doesn't easily repair. I think about Kevin sometimes, wonder how he's doing, whether he's learned anything from this mess. Part of me hopes he has. Part of me hopes this was the wake-up call he needed. But another part of me knows that people don't usually change until they truly want to. And I'm not sure Kevin has reached that point yet. Last week, I was working on a rocking chair commission when I found something tucked behind my tool bench. It was a photo, old and faded, showing Tom and me in this same workshop 20 years ago. We were grinning at the camera, arms around each other's shoulders, sawdust in our hair. I must have put it there years ago and forgotten about it. I studied Tom's face, trying to imagine what he'd think of everything that had happened. Would he have sided with his son, or would he have understood why I did what I did? I hope he would have understood, because at the end of the day, I didn't report Kevin out of anger or revenge. I did it because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their actions. Kevin needed to learn that trust has value, that family isn't a shield for bad behavior, that you can't steal from the people who love you and expect no repercussions. Maybe he'll learn that lesson. Maybe he won't. But either way, I've learned mine. Compassion doesn't mean being a doormat. Kindness doesn't mean letting people take advantage. And sometimes, the hardest boundary to set is the one with family. I put the photo back behind the bench, but this time, I secured it properly. Then I returned to work on the rocking chair. The rhythm of the tools familiar and comforting. My workshop, my tools, my peace. For the first time in months, that felt like enough.